Welcome to the Shortway Show. So happy that you are with me this evening. It's a little bit past 7 p.m. on the East Coast. So happy you're going to give me a chunk of your evening. I think I have a very interesting show because I have a guest who is someone who is a teacher. Well, was a teacher, still kind of is, but is an educator, I would say now, who has shifted from public school into a different school model that I've been talking about for literally years here in New York, but she's actually doing it. So many of you are going to be very happy to hear what she has to say, probably a bunch of questions too, but I think we should get into it. I'm going to be seeing if we can talk about things like teachers unions, problems in schooling, homeschooling, which of course New York State hates, like there's no tomorrow. They hate homeschooling, even though I homeschooled my own kid for a while, so I'm guilty of that. But I want to bring her up what she is, an educator, and she runs the Exodus Institute, which is a K through 12 online homeschooling tool. Kali Fontanilla, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. And for those of you who want to follow her, please feel free to do so. You can head over to thinkexodus.org, or you can follow her on Twitter at her name right there, Kali Fontanilla. So I have to ask you a crazy question. You were a teacher for 15 years. That's a long time to be a teacher. Most people who do have 15 years, they're just going to shut up, shut their mouths, put their head down, and just go till they retire. But you didn't do that. You were like, nope, I'm out. And when I usually hear of teachers leaving, the most common thing I hear is, well, it was burnout. That also was not you. It was much more of maybe a cultural issue. Tell me about that. Why does someone do what you did?
Yeah, actually, my teaching career was only getting better until the pandemic. I taught middle school. I started as an elementary school teacher and decided that wasn't for me. The bathroom breaks alone drove me crazy. And then I just did middle school. Middle school is my heart. I love teaching middle school.
Middle school's the hardest.
I know, and I like them.
Wow.
Energy. When you get them in line, they're so much fun. And then right before the pandemic, I switched to high school because my district was opening a brand new high school, and 300 teachers applied for my district to open the brand new high school. They only chose 30. I was one of them. I wanted to be on the ground floor of a new high school. And I also was ready to switch, my principal had given me 60 kids with IEPs. So those are kids that need.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot. You're only supposed to get about eight max. And they gave me 60 because they know I could handle it. They were burning me out. So I was like, I'm leaving. I'm going to try high school. And then we had the shutdowns happen. And you know what? I'm really glad I was teaching high school during the lockdowns, because in California, they staged lockdown for a year and 2 months. And
yes, New York was like that too.
Yeah, teaching high school was, I think, a lot easier than teaching middle school. But like I said, my career was only getting better. I was loving it. I was about to hit 6 figures because that's how much they teach this teachers. Sure. They pay the teachers in California, at least in my area. I had tenure. My husband was also a teacher in the district at another.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. In another school, at another school that he loved.
Hold on. Did he quit too?
Yes, he did. Yeah, we quit together.
Wow. Yeah. Now that is not very common at all. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And it's, as someone who was raised in a very poor household, my mom made like max $8,000 a year, and that's not enough to survive. We were on welfare, food stamps, Section 8 housing. It was hard to walk away from a job that was a consistent paycheck every day, but every month.
And benefits.
Yeah. And benefits. Yes. So yeah, it's just, I definitely didn't walk out because I was burnt out. I was in it for the long haul, but the educational system has changed so much this last 5 years.
Now, you talked about the things that bothered you, and there were many of them. And when you wanted to change them and stand up to say, wait a minute, this is wrong, you would have thought that when a teacher stands up and says, hey, I want to make things better, one would think everyone goes, yay, awesome whistleblower. Kali's awesome. Let's make sure she fixes things. The exact opposite happened. You were like the evilest person in the world. Tell me about that.
My school, the board president called me anti-people of color for speaking against the critical race theory indoctrination that was happening in the classroom in my district.
Wow.
So my district, ethnic studies is a required class in California. Gavin Newsom just signed that into law. it's not required by the schools to actually teach it yet. It's in the law, but my school decided to go ahead and get ready for the fact that this is going to be required. And they started teaching ethnic studies that pandemic year when we were shut down. Now, when you hear
Bad?
Say it again.
Ethnic studies doesn't sound bad. Is
Oh,
that
exactly. I was going to say that. When you hear the word ethnic studies, you're like, wow, we're going to learn about different cultures. This is probably
yeah, seems good.
class. Like, it's going to be one of those classes where you don't have to do much work.
Right.
And eat some tamales or learn
I
about.
would have picked that one if I was a kid. I've been like, oh yeah, I want that class.
Me too. And that's actually, there was a lot of that in the 90s. Ethnic studies had a little more of a, it was what you would imagine it to be. But I was noticing my students, because I taught the English language learners. That's what I did. I taught English language learners, and I taught the low readers. That's my heart. The kids that came to this country who are looking for a better life, whose parents sacrificed to come here. Sure. And I noticed that my students were failing that class. I checked their grades. We check their grades. We do a grade check every week because I want to know how they're doing in their other classes, because the skills that I'm teaching them are applying to other classes. And if I'm not doing my job,
that's how they're going to get the other classes, because their English skills are good.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. If
Makes
I'm not doing my job, they're going to fail their other classes.
Right.
Ethnic studies, I would say 50% of my students were failing it, 75% of the boys. And I'm asking, and I asked them, why are you guys failing this ethnic studies course? What's going on here? And I had some kids tell me, Miss Fontanilla, this class is so stupid. And it's required in 9th grade for them to take it. So because of the pandemic and things were shut down, I actually had access to the platform that the teachers were using for ethnic studies. And I was able to see all the lessons. And when you look at the lessons, it's the most far left. I mean, that's the best way to put it. Indoctrination that you could imagine. I mean, the kids were taking.
So what makes you think? And I'm curious because there's been a recent. You're an educator. I'm sure I'm going to preach the choir for you, but some of the audience may not know this. There has been an issue with boys failing and doing poorly throughout school, right? From K through 12, even into college. That's a common thing. Is this related or not related? Is this just coincidence? Why do you think it was the boys who were failing?
I think our boys are just getting fed up. I've noticed that so first of all, I started teaching my own generation, millennials. I'm a millennial. And then Gen Z came in, and these kids, they're starting to rebel against all this stuff being forced on them, especially the boys, They either go gung ho for it and become these little radical leftist fascists, because that's what they are, or they're like sick of it. They're tired of it. They're over cancel culture. They're over all the hyper race focused stuff. They just want a normal education. They don't want to be forced to use pronouns. They don't like, I've had boys come up to me and be like, why are all the girls lesbians now? Why are they all trans? Like,
well, it's funny that you say that, right? I have 2 daughters.
Yeah.
My oldest is 19.
Yeah.
My youngest is 13.
Oh yeah.
And they went through public school, most of them. I homeschooled my youngest during the pandemic because I didn't want to have her in school anymore. And we homeschooled her for 2 years. And also with the private school here or there and public school both. So they dealt with all that stuff. And people kept telling me when they talked about CRT, or as you mentioned, things like that, they kept telling me that's not really what's being taught. That's not happening. And I was like, I'm literally seeing it, right? The advantage. I mean, I hated the lockdowns. I thought they were terrible. We should have never done them. I can't stand them. But there was a silver lining. I got to see what my kids were learning. That's why I pulled my kid out of school. Like, I saw what they were doing. I couldn't understand why both of my daughters in different times came home and were so thoroughly confused so often, and eventually just worked their way through it, which with help from parents, obviously, right? Which is what we should be doing. But let me touch that piece back. I'm sorry, I went a little bit off topic.
No, it's good.
You've actually said that you're not actually against CRT. You're against it being taught in schools. And that if a parent wants to teach their kid CRT, they absolutely may. This is a nuance that I love. This is a very libertarian view. And I'm a libertarian, so I love hearing that. Right? That's a very libertarian view. Hey, I don't care if you want to teach your kid CRT, just don't force it in schools. And I think that was a different nuance that I remember you talking about also. Please walk down that road. I apologize. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, if you want your children to go to a rainbow school, if you want to teach them critical race theory, as long as you're not abusing them, go ahead. I mean, it's sad. I don't think it's going to help them, But this idea that we need to force it on our children, in the public schools, and that there's so many parents, and you'll notice that a lot of the parents that have gone viral speaking against critical race theory are Black parents.
Yes.
They're like, we don't want you teaching our kids that they're a victim everywhere they go, because the victim mindset is toxic. I've met plenty of people, Black dads who abandon their kids, who act like they're victims all day. And I'm like, come on now. Like, you guys need to step it up and take care of your kids and get it together and stop acting like a victim.
That there are a couple things I want to bring up with that. I understand that you want to teach history. I get that completely.
Mm-hmm.
I understand you want to, when it comes to the bad things in history, you want to assign people who are responsible. I do understand that completely. I do. My worry is that this should be a temporary assignment, but they've made it permanent.
Yes.
So that now I have to keep this forever.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that's also harder is, in America specifically, but across the world, we're more integrated than ever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So as we integrate, right, how guilty am I? Right? What if I'm white on one side and Black on the other, and I marry an Asian woman? Who's guilty? Are we all? What about our kids? I don't. Who gets what? So I think a lot that it becomes a whole lot harder. I think, in my head at least.
Well, we are so mixed. We just had that video go viral of Angela Davis. You know,
that's right.
Where she finds out that one of her ancestors was on the Mayflower, and she's like, you can see on her face, it's just like, you know, and she also found out that one of her ancestors was a slave owner. And this is the thing. Our history is not perfect. No one's history is perfect. In fact, our country has made great strides in race relations, but I'm seeing it reverse. I'm seeing more racism than I've ever seen in the last 10 years. And it's getting even worse amongst our young kids. There was just a video that went viral. I don't know if you saw it, of Black kids making white kids bow down to them on the schoolyard, forcing them to kneel down and bow down to them, and they're bullying these white kids and saying that they have white privilege. And it's just this awful video. And I'm like, this was not happening 10 years ago.
Speaking of privilege, you mentioned a privilege test.
Yes.
And I remember my daughter's very light-skinned, like I'm very light-skinned. My daughter's also very light-skinned.
Uh-huh.
And I remember, and we grew up in New York City, and it's very odd. She's now in Savannah. My oldest daughter's in Savannah now.
Mm-hmm.
And she was telling me how that when she was in New York City, she had light-skin privilege because there were so many people of different races and mixes and creeds and colors in New York City. But when she went to other places, she was just a Black girl.
Mm-hmm.
So her privilege changed depending upon her group of people that she was around. And you talk about a privilege test. Talk me through that.
Yeah. So the students on day 5 received a privilege quiz, and they were given 14 questions. And they had questions like, does your teacher look like you? When do we ever care about the color skin of our teacher? I had great teachers that are white. I had great teachers that were Asian. My favorite teacher that I had in high school was a gay white man, like completely opposite of me, right?
Right. Yep.
And how is that an oppression? So they went down on the oppression scale if they didn't have a teacher that looked like them. And that's a veiled way of saying, because most teachers in California were white, and in my district, a lot of them are white, even though my district was majority Hispanic, the kids.
Well, it's kind of weird though, in a way, because that will kind of backfire in one way, because the vast majority of teachers are women.
Yeah, exactly. We're not, and you know, we're talking about skin color here. They're not talking about whether the teacher's fat or not.
That's right. Yes. So if I'm a boy, no.
Yeah, exactly. But they're applying skin color here.
Correct.
You know?
Yes.
And then they also said, do you have more than 50 books in your homes? And I'm like, I mean, I have people that are intellectuals have more than 50 books in their homes, but most of these kids, especially like Hispanic kids that are, you know, parents are field workers, like they may not have 50 books in their home, and they're saying that's an oppression.
This is our new book.
Exactly.
So yeah, I don't have, right? That's our new book.
Yes. And just do your parents speak English? Were they born speaking English? So
once you go down this 14-point test,
yes,
what's the purpose? Like, do you pass or fail?
So in the end,
the
kids get their ranking against the other classmates, and they're asked whether or not
they rank against each other.
So they'll get their place in the class, and then they'll be like, they're asked to reflect on how it feels to be on the bottom, how it feels to be on the top. And that is just to divide the class by 14 loaded questions.
That actually makes me think about, some of the kids I know who are young in my both of my daughter's worlds.
Yeah.
Almost all of them that I know have some type of issue.
Yes.
It's
yes.
almost like if you don't, something's wrong with you.
Yes.
There's a meme that goes around that world. I'm going to get it wrong because I'm not 15, but there's a meme in like the high school world now that says, I'm going to misquote it, but you'll get what I'm talking about. It's like, hey, what kind of disability can I have to where I can still use slurs?
Yeah.
Right. So they're trying to be the bad thing so they can use slurs.
Yeah.
Like that's the joke, right? That's the meme that goes around.
Yeah.
But my point, reason why I say it is I feel like there is almost like a value to being a victim. I brought this up before. We have confused in our society the idea of being a victim versus being a hero. Right? Being a hero is having the problem and still doing something. That makes you a hero. I have some form of problem, whatever that is, and I still achieve something. You are a hero. We've made it to where, no, it's just having the thing. You don't do anything. I just have the problem.
Yeah.
Now I'm a hero.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm surviving having the thing.
Yeah. And that's, again, that's such a toxic mindset because I think of myself, I was overweight middle school and high school, almost over 200 pounds. I, came from a single family home, poor, just everything that could possibly be a bad start in life, I pretty much had. And if I had decided to just take that and wear it like a badge, my oppression and my perceive, I did have a rough start. Instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to do all in my power to change my circumstances. I'm not going to blame others for them, even though there are some others that people I can blame.
Carla, to be full with you, that's a whole lot harder in today's world.
Yes, you're right.
In today's world, trying to do that makes you ableist, right? Trying to do that, you're making everyone else look bad, right? So it's a lot harder to do that in today's world. And I see it again with my children. When you try to do that, sadly, you will be lonely.
Yeah.
And that's not easy when you're a teenager. Teenagers don't want to be lonely, right? They don't want to be lonely. They would rather get along. And this is the issue the worry I have also, which is self-censorship. That now you will see people censor themselves on purpose for fear of being ostracized.
Yep.
And to your point that I brought you step up and say, hey, I would like to fix something. I think this is bad. They didn't clap and put you up on their shoulders. They threw rotten eggs at you, right? I mean, it was not good. And I feel like, okay, you were an adult. You had a support system. You knew you had been through stuff in your life. So you were able to handle that. How can a 17-year-old, 16-year-old, 15-year-old kid, it's a whole lot harder. Not that they can't do it, but wow, it's harder.
Yeah. Especially today. I mean, it is just what these kids are being bombarded with in the public schools is non-stop pressure to conform to all of this stuff. And if they stand up, they do get bullied, and they can even be arrested now for hate crimes if they're not affirming another student's gender. And it's just the environment that we've created in our schools is so hostile, and these kids I'm worried about what's going to happen in the future when these children grow up, what it's going to be like.
I am too. And my biggest worry is what you mentioned was the boys, because what most people don't understand throughout history is they think the right answer is to punish the dumb boys, punish the dumb boys, punish the dumb boys. That's what we keep doing. But what they don't realize is literally the army of the fascists is alienated boys. Every single fascist that has ever taken over any nation, country, area, their army is filled with disenfranchised young men. That is who fills the armies. The people who will put you in the camp will be a disenfranchised young man. You can guarantee the guy who will put a bayonet in your stomach will be a disenfranchised young man. And we are creating an army for whatever fascist dictator decides to take over our country. We're recruiting for him.
Well, we're seeing that with Antifa, the rise of Antifa. I mean, you look at these kids,
example.
And they're just these disturbed children.
They want to be part of something.
Right?
They want to be part of something. And, I tell my story often. I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17. And I can look back now because my father passed when I was young. My father passed when I was 12. I look back now and I know I was desperately looking for positive male role models.
Yes.
That's what I was looking.
Yes.
I didn't know it then, right? I just did it.
Yeah.
But as I look back now, that's what I was looking for. And if I would have seen them in, say, Antifa or a gang or something, I probably would have gone there. Right? What's the old saying? If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
Yeah.
I think that's what happens. The young men are looking for something. And the first person goes, I got something. They go, okay. Okay. When they should be in school, feeling good about themselves, being successful, having plans for the future. And so few of our young men are doing that. So let me do a little bit of admin if I can.
Sure.
Guys, if you guys like what you're hearing, if you think it's a good show, do me a favor, click that like button. It does matter. Please click it. I got to get past all those algorithms because you know they always want to shadow ban me. So please do it if you possibly can. And if you happen to be watching this on Twitter, please retweet this right now. Literally, just click retweet right now if you can. If you want your comment to go to the top, you can super chat me if you want to on Larry Sharp YouTube. Go over there, super chat me. It'll go right there. I will grab some comments in a second, but if you want yours to the top, you want to support the show, please do that. If you want to support the show, but you don't want to spend any money, that's okay. I'm not mad at you, but instead, you can actually go to theadvocates.org, and they're my sponsor. You can go there, and you can take any of their quizzes. I don't care which one. You can take the world's smallest political quiz if you want to. You can take the police accountability quiz if you want. You can take the foreign spending survey. So many surveys. Take any of them. They take about 3 or 4 minutes. Share them online. You've supported the show without spending $1. They are my sponsors. If you want to make me happy, which I know you do or you wouldn't be watching, you can support my sponsors, and then it makes them happy, and we're all happy. But lastly, Kali was so good to come today, and she's given us so much cool stuff. Support her. Head over to thinkexodus.org, see what she's doing over there, and follow her on Twitter, right? You can follow her right there. Everything, all her description is in the show description. Please check her out. So I want to grab a couple of comments if I could.
Sure.
Joe asks a very important question, which I think is a very hard one to actually answer, which is, what is your definition of critical race theory? And I bring this up because I think society has bastardized that term.
Sure. Sure.
And what I mean by that is actually teaching critical race theory in a college level legal class is actually not a bad thing. Understanding that in that realm.
Actually,
of law and such.
My BA was in pre-law, so I remember critical race theory in
there we go.
My pre-law BA. Yes.
Yep. It's not a bad class to take. It's good. It's in a specific realm. But what they're teaching now isn't critical race theory. There's no privilege quiz in college, right? That's
there actually was. When I had
there was.
They had us do a privilege walk. So Kimberly,
a privilege walk.
Yeah.
Okay,
so it wasn't a quiz; it was a walk. They had us all go outside, and we had to like take a step forward if we've had this, take a step back if we've had that.
Oh, got it.
Yeah,
okay.
And so it was the same thing, but
Got
then
it.
a walk. But when we got to look at our classmates, I remember there was a couple white kids up with me, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess because I had a lot of, I guess I was very unprivileged or whatever. And there was a lot of people in the back, and I was probably one of the top least privileged or whatever. This was in college 15 years ago.
So you were the bad guy.
No, I was not privileged. I was the least privileged.
Oh, you were not privileged. Okay,
yeah.
So you were the good guy. Okay,
yeah, I guess so.
Okay, got it.
But it was so silly. I mean, it was like this, and I didn't really realize what it was until now. When I look back and I'm like, now they're giving this to kids. Now they're giving this to high schoolers. When I saw the privilege quiz.
How do you define CRT in the case where it's being taught? What they're saying is being taught in K through 12.
Yeah,
how would you define that?
I'll give it the definition that they gave my students. So in my ninth grade ethnic studies course, people who say that critical race theory is not in our public K through 12 schools, that's not true. It is. And it's even explicitly taught. My students were taught the definition of critical race theory, and my students were taught to analyze school policy through the critical race theory lens. And that's exactly what it is. It's a lens, a way to look. It's basically saying that the racism in the past, everything that was set up in the past that was set up for white people, is now being reflected, is in our nation now. It's a way to look at. It's a lens that you put on. So instead of just walking into the courthouse and being like, I'm going to be treated the same as everybody else, you're like, no, if I'm white, I'm going to be treated with privilege. If I'm black, I'm going to be treated worse because this system was set up to oppress black people. It is and that's what the critical race theory lens is all about, is looking at like school policy. For example, they had the kids analyze suspensions, and they noticed that Black kids were getting suspended at a higher rate than white kids. Well, instead of maybe blaming something else like fatherless homes, they deemed the institution racist. And so they stopped suspending for willful defiance, because they said more Black kids are getting suspended for this because of the critical race theory lens, of looking at it through the lens of race, that it's because the kids are Black that there's more suspensions happening, instead of looking at maybe other elements. Yeah.
I want to touch two pieces to this. The first one is, okay, let's say that the system is producing a racist outcome.
Sometimes that does have, I mean, sometimes that does. There is, like, for example, then, Asian kids, they're doing better. They're doing the best in California right now. You know?
So let's assume that a system is producing a racist outcome. Mm-hmm. If that's true, why do we immediately just destroy the system versus try to find a better system?
I would say it's a racial disparity, not racist. Sometimes there's going to be racial disparities. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's racist. So, for example, like math.
So let me hold on. Let me walk down that road.
Go ahead.
So let's say, I'll change my word. I don't mind.
Sure.
Let's say we have a system that is producing racial disparities.
Yes.
And it's negative against a certain group.
Yes.
Right.
And
whatever that group
for
is.
Others. Yeah.
Yeah. Assume that happens, right? And that does happen. The outcomes can be.
Oh yeah.
Have racial disparities. Assume that's true. I wonder why we're constantly just trying to blow up the entire system.
That's what they do.
Versus trying to make it better.
So Kimberly Crenshaw, who's one of the founding theorists of CRT, her whole goal is to dismantle the systems of white supremacy. It's in her writings. That's what they want. They want to dismantle the systems and start anew. That includes the patriarchy, capitalism, Christianity, marriage, even heterosexual marriage. So because all of these systems were built by white supremacists, by white supremacy, and we need to dismantle them for a new system. That's the goal. And that's what my students were taught. That's what these ninth graders were taught. That we need a liberation. And you'll hear this in Black liberation movie. We need to be liberated from these systems of white supremacy. And that's what they were taught. And that's a huge part of it.
Touch two pieces of this now. The other piece is, once you walk down that road, aren't you now, and you brought this up, which is another piece I like that you brought up, which was the idea that this doesn't just hurt Black kids when you destroy the system. This hurts everybody. White kids get hurt. Asian kids get hurt. Everybody
Immigrant kids that come to this country for a better education. They want the higher standards.
Yes. And you talk about, once you just say, okay, so since the testing system that we have produces racial disparities, let's blow the whole thing up. No tests, or what you
no homework.
You decolonizing a classroom. You've talked about that in the past, right?
Yes.
The idea of decolonizing a classroom to where now everyone gets an A, no homework. Isn't that, while that may be helping some kids, I mean, I'm sure some kids are being helped by that.
Yeah, I would have loved that in high school.
Yes, I'm taking this class.
I was not a very good student in high school, so I'm like, sure, we all get an A. Yeah.
Absolutely. But aren't I hurting basically every other kid?
Absolutely. I mean, we can't have the standards lowered in this country. We already are falling behind in our educational system. And there's nothing inherently different about these kids. My first job was in Compton. That was I was 23 years old. I was fresh out of college. My first job was in Compton, taking over for a teacher that got burnt out. And these kids worked her. And I came in, and guess what I did? These are all Black and brown kids. I held them to a really high standard. And the second day I was there, I had one girl tell me, I'm not doing this shit. Like she said. And she's a fourth grader. This is when I was still teaching elementary. And they were upset at me. They hated the high standards that I had for them. But guess what? They were able to meet the standard and blow it up. And when I had to leave, they were crying and hugging me and saying I was the best teacher they ever had. These kids are thirsty to be held to the high standard. I know this because that's all I ever taught was Black and brown kids. Yes. That's all I've ever taught. I taught Mexican kids in Salinas. That was where I had the majority of my career. So it absolutely does hurt them. It hurts them all.
Let me go to another piece which you brought up, which is you're saying how they're being taught this in school. But it isn't just school. You recently did a talk about TikTok
Yeah.
and about how social media is also, and I got to tell you, I found that with my children too. And what I decided, and people think I'm crazy for this, but I'll just tell you how I decided to parent my kids. I didn't believe that that I could keep my kids off the internet. I didn't believe that I could actually guard them from all the bad. So instead, what I did was I gave them literally no guardrails, but I said, I'm involved with you. So literally, as my kids were playing Minecraft or Roblox or whatever they were playing, TikTok, I got a TikTok account. I got a Roblox account. I got a Minecraft account. I got every single game and thing I also got, and we do it together. So I would understand some of the memes. I'd understand what's going on, and I could have a conversation, and they would feel open talking to me. So I was able to hear the things they were talking about. And I got to tell you, TikTok confused my kids more than anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, more than anything. My youngest daughter was probably 12, 11, and she was trying to explain to me all the different sexualities. And I was like, you're not in puberty yet. Like, what? But the advantage was she wasn't hiding it from me. So we could talk about it. I can explain. Some people care about this, people care about that. And, over time, I think it went pretty well. But I'm with you. I guess what I'm saying is I'm agreeing with you. I see how social media really affects our kids, and they begin to believe that social media is real.
So
the 14-year-old on social media who's telling them about life, the 14-year-old, they think, well, I'm only 12, so clearly the 14-year-old knows everything about life, and they stop believing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, TikTok, I saw the phenomenon when it hit the classroom. I mean, these kids just immediately became addicted to TikTok as soon as it hit this country. And adults weren't really on the platform. It was really controlled by teens and early 20-year-olds. And then we finally started joining it during the pandemic. We finally started kind of going on there and stuff, but it was just like it was kind of like Snapchat. That's kind of like a teen place. But these kids are going there's whole accounts with 1 million followers where the whole account is about their gender identity. That's it.
Yes.
And that's just a weird thing to me. Like, imagine, it's strange that every single video is about your non-binariness. like that, and they're going viral for it. And I think the kids are seeing this. They're seeing the community that's happening within that community, and they're wanting to be a part of it. And,
yes, that's the part that I see, particularly.
Yeah.
You've brought this up too. The idea that the lockdowns were harmful to our kids for just so many reasons, and I agree completely. The issue that gets me is one of the reasons why TikTok exploded, I think, is exactly what you're saying. Kids were alone. They were in school. They were looking to be part of something, whatever that thing was. And then here comes TikTok saying, the right answer is this thing I say. And they say it with conviction. And there's 1 million people who look at it. And then sometimes they respond. And now you make a little community about it. And I'm in. I guess I'm the thing. The new phrase you just made up is what I am too, because now I have friends. So I'm that thing also. I saw a lot of that. How can a teacher compete?
Well, that's part of the reason, another reason why I left the profession, because I knew I had one trans student in my career. And part of it is because I taught the English learners, and most of them came from Mexico, very traditional families.
Right. Sure.
There's not a lot of trans kids that are coming, especially the immigrants, the ones that are coming directly from the country and coming to America. But I had one trans student, and they were all in. They were not trying to do this non-binary, wishy-washy, gender fluid thing that's happening now. I feel like this gave these kids an outlet to where they can kind of go that route, but not commit.
There we go.
And so I knew that this was starting to hit the classrooms. It was hitting the school. It wasn't quite hitting my classroom yet, but there was non-binary and gender fluid kids in the school. But I knew it was going to eventually hit my classroom, and I was going to have a kid that's going to be a they, them. And I just can't do that. I can't, it's, first of all, grammatically really hard to call someone a they or a them or a their. And then secondly, it's just, I'm not going to affirm their mental health issues. They're going through mental health issues, because I think that regardless, I think that for one, we're always going to have men that are more feminine and maybe want to present as feminine. We're always going to have women that are tomboys and maybe want to present as masculine. But this idea that we have to affirm their genders and we have to, non-binary kids have to be affirmed as they, them, when these kids go through so many changes. You're not the same person as when you were in high school.
That's the thing that I realized that I am worried about, right?
Yeah.
Because there are kids obviously who have gender dysphoria and there's a serious problem. Of course they exist. And there are confused kids who may just be gay or maybe are on the spectrum and don't understand gender roles and don't understand where they land. There's so many reasons why someone could be saying what they're saying. How do you know when is the right or the wrong one? And I always worry about that. I don't see an easy answer, but I see your point. I want to grab a couple questions if I could. Alexander asks, I'm sorry, real fast, I'll do this. What area / school district of California was Kali teaching in? I live in California and don't believe teachers in my area get paid $100,000.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Salinas Unified High School District, go look up their teacher salary pay scale. It definitely goes up to 100, even 105K for teachers that have been in the district for a long time. Yeah. Yes. I think the Valley, like if you live in the Valley and stuff like that, like the Central Valley, they're not paying the teachers as much. But in my area, we started at 50 and eventually get up to 100K once we're in the district for a long time. And then there's also a lot of extra money. I was always department chair. I also did a summer school, which was a good pay. And so I was surviving, that's for sure, even though California is expensive.
Yeah, well, the thing to remember is, there are certain states like in Kansas and such where teachers get hammered.
Oh, when I moved to Florida,
devastated.
That's part of the reason why I started my own school. Is I moved to Florida and I was going to take a $40,000 pay cut. And I was like, well, I can just do this on my own. I'm going to give someone all this time. I'm going to do it on my own. And the Florida schools are pretty bad. I mean, Florida gets a lot of positive press, but the school systems here are not that great.
Well, the New York school systems are worse.
Yeah, you're right.
They rank in the 40s. So they're out of 51. Because they count, when they do the stats, they count DC as separate, right? So it's 51 total. And New York State usually ranks in the 40s. Yeah. When we're lucky, we rank in the 30s.
I think we have an educational crisis across the nation. I think we're all like, it's like, which one's worse is basically how we're ranking them.
I had a union guy on my show several months ago, and he was talking about how teachers unions are important. I agree, unions are important. But teachers unions, I said, I'm not sure how important they are. I'm not. And he was talking about how they got broken up in Wisconsin. And I said, okay, that may not be a bad thing. My question is, how good are the schools in Wisconsin, right? And if the union system got broken up, but the schools are better, I'm okay with that. If the union got broken up and the schools are worse, I'm not okay with that. I want to service the children is what I care about. Union or not doesn't matter to me personally. I just want to make sure that the kids are taken well. Now, New York State has the strongest union in the entire country. Yeah. And we rank in the 40s. Wisconsin ranks in the top 10. Yeah. Usually 7 or 8. Yeah. And I was like, whoa, maybe unions are a problem.
Oh, yeah.
And you have talked about unions in the past.
Yes.
On how they are a problem. Tell me about that.
So I was never a union member, mainly because when I first started teaching, it was almost over $100 a month, every month taken out of your paycheck. And back then you would still have to pay your national union dues, just not your local union dues. And now that's illegal. You can opt out of both, which is great.
Janet's decision changed.
But yeah, teachers unions, first of all, they protect teachers that are molesting kids. I saw that happen in my district. They protect teachers that are hurting our children.
Tons of stories in New York about that.
Exactly. And it's that I saw that firsthand. There was a teacher that was a 5th grade teacher that was letting his kids sit on his lap, girls sit on his lap. And the union went to bat for him and protected him. And so they're doing that. And then also they're completely controlled by the left. And they give their 90% of the people they donate to are left-leaning politicians and left-leaning ballot initiatives and stuff like that. So for example, in California, Prop 16, which was going to bring affirmative action on crack to California, that had a huge gift. I think it was like $3 million was given to Prop 16 by the teachers unions. And then I ended up being one of the official rebuttal statements on the ballot guide in California, because it was Asians that was behind funding the anti-affirmative action bill, because they knew it was going to cause a lot of discrimination against them, because they are overrepresented in colleges and universities for
Right.
getting in.
Absolutely. Yep.
And they were very much vocal, but they needed someone who wasn't Asian because they knew they were going to get discriminated against. So they actually asked
Right.
me to do a statement in the ballot guide, and we won. I mean, it was amazing because their side had so much funding, including the teachers unions, and our side won, defeating Prop 16.
But my worry with that is, I'm not sure how long that side can keep winning, because the idea of tenure, right, and versus the idea of merit pay and things of that sort, people, to your other point you brought up in the past, socialism and the ideas of socialism are becoming more and more popular, right? More and more people. The country's been going left since 2008.
Oh yeah,
right. Since the crash, 2008.
Yeah.
The country's been moving further left. There was no real, and that's because our government failed us. Our government failed to help people who were in trouble. And generally speaking, the Republican Party is the party of no ideas, and the Democratic Party is the party of bad ideas. So when I have a problem and the only idea I hear is the Democratic idea, I go, okay, I'll take that, right? Because there's no other answer for me. So I start moving towards that. Not just that, people keep moving into cities because there was the recovery after 2008. So urbanization has been huge. Now, I believe over 50% of Americans live in an urbanized area. So now they're all going to cities. You go into cities, you become more left. That's what happens, right? So the country is shifting towards the left. As it does that, they're going to be looking at things like merit pay as evil capitalism, right? We don't want that. That's not fair to others. And I feel like this is a battle that we may be losing. Am I wrong on this?
Well, I'll give you an example of that. I was a very successful teacher. I really loved keeping my classroom super interactive and doing really fun stuff with my students. But you can't do fun stuff with your students unless you have good classroom management. And that's something I was really good at, was making sure these kids were in line. I would take 2 weeks to get them to know the routines in class and all of this stuff so that I would have a great rest of the year. I had a district administrator come to me and be like, all those fun projects you're doing with your students, I want you to stop doing them because they're not getting that in the other classes. And it's not fair. So they basically told me to stop being an excellent teacher and lower my standard as a teacher because the kids it wasn't equal or equitable, because the kids in these other classes with teachers that didn't know how to manage them and just had them, go on the computer all day weren't doing the same thing. And so that's happening all the time.
Instead of rewarding you for being special, they punished you.
Exactly.
And then in turn actually punished your kids.
Exactly. And I left that district after that. When she told me that, I was like, because I did a whole health fair in my class where invited the parents, and they had booths and they had their long research papers. This is 6th graders. They had their long research papers. They had poster boards presenting. They also had an activity that they had to do. There was like 8 different booths, and they were mad at me about that. They were like, and the fact that these other teachers.
Let me go one step further on this. I've done a lot of teaching in my day job when I'm not doing this. I'm a business consultant, and a lot of my training has been with New York City agencies. And many of the agencies I've trained, what I hear, they're all union workers, and one thing I hear all the time is, "Oh no, Lotta, we can't work any harder." I said, "What do you mean?" Well, because they get mad at us because and I'm not joking. If we service somebody better than others, they get mad at us. So all the service level has to come down. And these are people who are serving New York City residents. So you're paying the fees on your taxes and your fees for these services, and they are purposefully giving you less service so that it's fair to everybody. And that was a common thing. They were like, "No, we can't work any faster. We can't do it because then other people's not fair." And they're all, or worse, you're making us all look bad. I got that one too. And now everyone will have to work harder. And we don't want to work harder. So stop being good. I heard that all the time. And it was an issue. But my worry is it getting any better? And I feel like it may not be.
I'm not going back. Well, I can't go back for one.
I'm not going back.
I think it has only become worse. And I know this because I know so many teachers that have loved their profession. And now they're just like, "Holly, this is awful. This is the worst."
I hear it all the time. I do too.
And I actually recruited a lot of my friends and family to become teachers because I think that we need more good people to be teachers. And it's funny because some of them started their career this last 2 years, and I've apologized. I'm like, "I'm so sorry. I convinced you to become a teacher because this is not This is not the business. I mean, I had one friend who had to wear a mask the whole year, and she was teaching second graders.
Yes.
And she had to go, kids, I'm smiling right now. I'm smiling, because the second graders didn't know she was smiling.
Of
Because
course.
she had
Yes.
to wear a mask.
You have some supporters here. The Fluky Unicorn says we need more teachers like her in New York. There we go. So are you still in California now, physical, or have you moved?
I'm in Florida now.
You're in Florida now. Okay,
Yeah,
there we go.
we exited
Okay.
2 years ago to move to Florida.
There we go. Patty says, people do not all learn the same way. Why do we feel all children must learn the same stuff at the same time? I feel in my soul what Pink Floyd said, we don't need no thought control. I would agree with that one. I think that is true. Yes. So Carla says, that history is somebody else's past before our time. Agreed, right? And I'm not against, I think we should teach history. I think we should, and we should assign blame to people who did, everything. But it doesn't mean that stain is permanent. Yeah. Right?
And they also, the left actually leaves out a lot of the history. When they teach slavery now, they leave out a lot of what's going on and what really happened. They want to paint a narrative. They want these kids to be angry. And so they won't teach about, how the Cherokee owned slaves. They owned Black slaves. They won't teach that. The kids don't learn that.
The other thing that you brought up just now is, in many cases, and I saw it in high school as my kids were going through high school, the teachers weren't encouraging the kids to be successful in any form of career. They weren't. They were teaching them, I'm not joking, to be successful as activists.
Yep.
That was actually what, one of my daughters had an actual class, that part of the class was, how can you be an activist? And I was like, okay, so great. So where is the part where you get a job?
Or where they learn how to read and write and become proficient.
Where's the part where you learn how to balance a checkbook?
Yes.
Or understand credit rating, or understand how to get a loan? Like any of those, where's that class? No. And again, I'm in New York City, so I am in the belly of the beast. Literally, my congressperson's AOC. So do you understand where I live, right?
Yeah.
So I'm in the belly of the beast. But I'm sure other places aren't as bad as this, but where I live, that's what's actually happening. They were taught that you need to be, you're judged by your activism.
And that's because there's a new generation of teachers. So these teachers are being radicalized in their college education. And then they're coming to the schools and radicalizing the kids. We know that our colleges are very left-leaning, and they're even they used to be free speech zones, and now they're becoming like where you'll get kicked off campus.
They're censored,
and they're not allowing diversity of thought on these colleges. So these kids now, these early 20-year-olds that are going into teaching programs, the teaching programs are very much corrupted by the left and controlled by the left. And now they're taking that stuff that they're learning, that garbage, and they're putting it onto the children.
So is the answer homeschooling? I mean, I know you've decided to go that route. There are many things you could have done. You chose to start is the Exodus Institute, correct?
Yes, yes.
You've chosen to go the Exodus Institute route, which is a K through 12 online homeschooling tool. Is that right?
Yeah, it's an academy. So it's a
Why did you go down that route?
I mean, I first of all, I just, like I said, I looked at the jobs out here in Florida, and it was such a lot lower pay than what I was getting in California. And it's something that's always been on my heart, but I never thought I was capable of. I thought I think that's a lot of things. And that's something I used to tell my students is, and especially Black and brown kids, they don't dream big enough. And that's what the CRT completely. Crap does is it actually causes them to dream less. And to think
100%.
think that the world's against them, so they're not going to dream big. So I was just willing to be a teacher in a classroom with a principal overlord, never thought of owning my own school. And then I had all these doors open for me to do it. Like we got our accreditation through another school that we partnered with, and we were able to do that really quickly. And then we built this enrichment program that I'm very passionate about, that actually counters these leftist narratives. Because like what you did, where you're like, okay, there's the choice where you can protect your child from TikTok, and you can be like, all right, you're not going to see any of this stuff. Then there's also the point of teaching them through this.
Yes, and I think that's what I did.
Yeah, and then these kids are going to get exposed to this stuff. I don't know. I don't think there's a kid in this nation that doesn't know that there's a trans and gay and LGBTQ agenda being inserted in front of their faces in every way possible. I mean, it's good to shield them, but it's also good to prepare them to counter this stuff.
Yes.
And so our
Absolutely.
program, our enrichment program, which is only $20 a month, is lessons done by me or my husband, where we counter all of these narratives because we want our children to be strong in the future, because the left is radicalizing their kids and they're going to grow up to be these crazy Nazis. I mean, these fascists, that's what they are. And so we need to make sure that
I see it already. I see their anger.
yes.
And I also see the fear, right?
Yes.
It's they're afraid of each other.
Yes. Yes.
And their way of dealing with this is, I have to be more righteous than the other.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever is the most pious is the winner.
Yeah.
I'm the most pious, therefore I am more powerful than you. Even if I'm not physically powerful or smarter or savvy or anything, whoever is the most pious is the winner. And I feel like I see a lot of that now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's, I mean, I also don't think I could get a job in the public schools again, because if you just look up my name, I actually exposed the lessons online. So I took the curriculum and I took screenshots of it and I put it online. What principal would hire that?
Right.
You know, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to get, and if someone's left leaning and they look me up, it's done. Like, I'm not going to get hired. And so this is kind of like, it just worked out for me. We have over 120 students and growing.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yeah, and I don't really advertise it that well. I'm not a business person, so that's something that I'm working on. We cashed out our retirement to do this.
When you have a moment,
yeah,
I'll give you a little bit of a free tip.
Sure.
I actually have another YouTube page. YouTube page is called The Neo Sage.
Okay.
That is my business consulting page. Lots of videos on there. They're free. Please enjoy. They will help you to deal with some things.
Thank you.
Here we go. Yes.
I'll
The Neo Sage. There's many of them. Everything from leaving voicemails to starting sales calls to getting customers, the whole deal. Enjoy.
Okay.
How to hire people, all those things.
Yeah.
Oh, good. So, any case, I do want to do a little bit of admin if I could. Guys, if you like what we're saying, please hit that like button. It does matter. You might think it doesn't matter. You're wrong. It does matter. Every like counts. Every comment counts. If you're watching on Twitter, retweet this right now. Every time you retweet, that counts too, right? If you can, please do so. If you happen to be watching on YouTube and you want to super chat me on Ladder Shop, you can super chat me if you want to. It'll get your comment right to the front. And support the show by going to the world's smallest political quiz, theadvocates.org. They are my sponsor. Go there, take one of their quizzes, take one of their tests, whatever you like. They're a couple of minutes. That's it. Take it, share it online so that people see it, and then other people start talking. And that's what I want, more and more conversations. That's why they're my sponsor. If you note, I have one sponsor. That is my sponsor. I care about them. It matters to me. Please do it. It's free and it supports the show. So please do that to the best of your ability if you can. And as you hear me talk all the time, please support Kylie if you can, right? Check her out at her website, which is right there, thinkexodus.org, or follow her on Twitter. And her spelling, if you happen to be listening to the podcast, the spelling is KALIFONTANILLA. Check her out on Twitter to make that work. Let me grab a couple more comments if I could. Let's see here. Elizabeth says, I just watched a video of a woman in Ohio who was sued by her school district because she wanted the kindergarten curriculum on paper to know what her child was learning. Yes. Now
Well, this is a new phenomenon, because we've been just dropping off our kids off at schools and being like, oh, we trust it because we remember what it was like when we were kids. And now parents are finally waking up and asking for transparency, and the districts and the teachers unions are having a temper
But they don't have to in certain states. And here's what people don't get it. In New York State, we have codified in our Constitution that education is a right. And everyone thought that's a great thing. That is a terrible thing. And let me tell you why it's terrible. Sounds good. Making education a right sounds amazing. And I get if someone would think that's a good thing. The sound is awesome. But here's the reality. Once you make it a right in our state, the state now has the right to take your children. Because the state now has a legal obligation to educate them as the state sees fit. You've just surrendered your parental rights by making education a right. They have a legal right to take your children and educate them. Because it's in the Constitution now, they have a legal right. Second, what making anything a right does, it doesn't make it better. It just makes it more expensive. That's all it does. New York State education is still a steaming pile of shit. It was for years and still is to this day. But now New York State pays the most of all states on each kid. We pay over $30,000 per year per kid, the highest per capita of any state in the country, more than California. So yes, Elizabeth, that's a terrible story, and I understand it. She will lose if Ohio has it in their constitution, because legally Ohio can just say, no, you don't have a right to educate your kids. The state does. It's in our constitution. It's their right. So there we go. So yes, just a little piece I thought you might find interesting.
And that's part of the reason why I'm more of an advocate for homeschool now. I don't think it's for everyone. And that's part of the reason why I opened my school, because we do have a fully accredited K through 12 program where people can plug and play and they don't really have to do any teaching. I mean, some people think of homeschool and it's like, I have to sit and teach this kid all day and be around them. No, there's other options, but also it's to keep your kid out of the system. I think that this is something that the left used to talk about, was institutionalizing our children. Yep. And I remember when I was on the left, that was a big concern. It was like, we don't want our kids to be institutionalized, blah, blah, blah. And now it's like, sign me up for institutionalization now.
If you go back, I'm old enough to remember when the censorship people used to be Republicans. Back in the 70s and 80s, it was the Republicans who were the censorship people, not the Democrats.
No, I know.
It's completely opposite now.
Yeah,
the Democrats are all the censorship people now.
Yeah.
It's totally reversed.
Yeah.
It used to be Democrats used to be anti-war.
Oh, yeah. I remember that too.
You go back 60s, 70s, all anti-war.
At least the voters were, not necessarily the politicians, but the voters.
That's true. Good point.
Yeah.
Good point. Yes. But it's completely reversed. Absolutely. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Sasha's happy. She says, excellent topic. So there we go. Dave says, I never thought any of my teachers looked like me. They were older and smarter. I was younger. And
that's a good one.
There we go. Absolutely. So Alexander goes on to say, I honestly don't give a if my professors and guys look like me. Just A, be competent when teaching the material. B, have real experience in the subject you're teaching. And C, check your bias at the door. That's not too much to ask of a teacher.
Yep.
That's not too much. I think that seems to make sense. I like the idea. Absolutely. Jean says, I took a privilege quiz. It showed that I'm not privileged. That can't be right, though, since I'm white. So I guess that
cancels all that out.
That's it. It's all canceled. So I guess you are by default. That's kind of how it works. Yes. So Sam says, and Sam used to be a teacher. I think, yeah, that is right. To me, all critical theories sounds are ideology reinforced by cherry-picked data and the logical fallacies, logically flawed and upheld by bullying, threatening anyone who questions them. What do you think?
Boy, do I know that as a fact.
There we go.
Yes.
There we go. I think it's true, right? I say this all the time. When you honestly believe and know that what you're saying is correct and true, you don't care if anyone else knows. It doesn't matter. You don't require social proof. You know it's right. But when in your heart you're not sure, or you think it might be wrong, everyone has to believe me because I'm relying upon social proof to make my thing right. It's not really right. But if everyone tells me it's right, well, now it's right.
Yes.
So
true.
Yeah, I think that's a big issue too. So let me go on, if I could, to the idea of lowering standards. I know we talked about it for a second, but I had that problem when I was in the Marine Corps. When I was in the Marines, they were just starting to bring women into the ground side. I joined the Marine Corps in the 80s. To tell you how old I am, my first commander-in-chief was Ronald Reagan. So you know when I went to the Marine Corps. And when I was on the ground side in the Marines, there were no women. Women were not allowed to be anywhere near combat. That was not a thing then. Now there are far more women in the combat area now. There were none back then. And they were bringing women in. And I was against it, not because I was against women, but they had lowered the standards for women to be in the Marine Corps. And I was like, if you're going to be in the ground side, you got to be able to pick me up and haul my injured ass across the battlefield. I don't care if you're a man or a woman or gay or but can you pick me up when I took a round in the chest? Can you get me back so I can get patched up? That's what I was worried about. And so I know it's a bit different, but I feel like the concept was the same, that I was worried that the person in this case wouldn't be physically strong enough.
Mhm.
And maybe I was biased. I mean, I was a kid then, but maybe I was biased. I didn't care as much if they weren't in combat, because then I thought, all right, if you're not in the combat world, I'm not that concerned if you're physically strong or not. That's not a
Yeah.
big deal for me, right? You're
Yeah.
in the rear with the gear, not that big of a deal. But I was concerned if you were going to be in the front line with me. Is that a similar issue in our country? Is it a similar issue in education, or no? Is it not a good analogy?
I think it is a great analogy, because these children are what are we going to do when we're elderly and they're the ones running our country? Do we want a bunch of inept morons who care more about skin color than about being able to read and write, running our country? No, we don't. We don't want to lower the standards for our children, because this is something that when you look at a child, they're not going to be a child forever. They're someday going to be an adult. They're someday going to have a job. Some of them are going to become our politicians. One of them is going to become our president. And we have to be making sure that these next generations are properly trained to run the country. And that's not happening right now. These kids can't even get licenses. The amount of kids getting
they don't get
driver's license. Yeah, they're afraid to drive.
Yes.
And there was a study that just came out that only 20% of 18 to 22-year-olds would qualify to go into the military right now.
Yes.
The rest of them are too low IQ or whatever, disabled.
They all have, too many of them have drug issues. And I don't mean drug as in addiction issues.
Yeah.
I mean, they're taking too many medications. They're all medicated up.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then this new generation. Okay,
they're overweight.
Yeah,
they're also overweight
yes.
because they spend all the time in front of screens,
yes,
and not outside doing stuff. So they're overweight. That's one big thing. And secondly, they're all medicated up. Yep. So they're all medicated and they're overweight. Yes, the military has been struggling to get people. I mean, I deal with some veterans. I'm a veteran myself. I still know many veterans who are in that world, and they struggle to get people. They're going into high schools now. They're trying to get. They have changed. They have, to your point, they've lowered the standards because they can't. If I remember it right, the military hasn't made its numbers in over 2 years. Like, it has not. And they check quarterly. They have quarterly numbers where they check. Did you make the numbers? In over 2 years, they haven't made the numbers. They can't make them anymore. They can't make them anymore.
Well, these kids also don't respect Joe Biden. I've seen that even the leftist kids, the left-leaning kids don't like Joe Biden. So they don't respect our commander in chief. They don't want to be under him. And then we have another generation coming up called Generation Alpha. And they're just, I mean, we're going to end up with some blubbering morons if we don't, because these are the kids that are born during pandemic, and already we're showing signs that these kids are way behind developmentally. And so your analogy of the lowering of the standards, these kids can't do any hard work. Everything is with kid gloves. They have no calluses on their hands from digging ditches. They're just pale and inside all day. They don't have very good social skills. That was something I was seeing a lot with these kids. They don't have they can't talk to adults. They can't talk to each other. Yeah, they can't talk to each other. Our district had to open up wellness centers in every school for kids to go have a safe space because they couldn't handle the classroom. I mean, it was just. I remember one story. A kid says a joke about, I won't do it. I'm not going to kill myself or something. I'm doing this, whatever. And it triggered the kids because they talked about suicide. And I thought to myself, if that triggers you because someone made a suicide joke about themselves, a joke, I keep doing this, I'm going to want to kill myself, right? That kind of joke. If that triggered you, how are you going to handle life in general? Life is so much harder than that. When life punches all of us in the face. Whenever life decides to punch us, it will do so. And it will just punch all of us, no matter how cool you think you are, rich, poor, whatever. Life will punch all of us at least once, if not multiple times, at least once in the face. And they're teaching the black and brown kids that every time life punches you, it's because you're black. It's because you're brown. Yes. And that's something that I want to say is, like, you could be dealing with a jerk. You could be dealing with a jerk teacher. Yes. You could be dealing and it's constantly, these kids are constantly like, it's because I'm black. It's because that I get, and so they're giving this lens to these kids to always look at everything through race. So whenever they're oppressed or whenever they have something bad happen to them, they could be like, it's because I'm black. And it's a toxic mindset. And I'm really worried for our future. I'm just going to put that out there. That's why I opened up my own school. I'm not trying. I want to make sure that at least I did my part to help train the next generation to fight all this stuff.
There we go. Christine says, love this show. Thank you both. Jameer says, great conversation. Wow, you got fans. I don't know what you're doing. You're doing something right, Collie. People like you here. You got fans. I love it. I love it. That's good. Absolutely. Jameer says, great guest. So we're doing good. I think that's amazing. So the Scientific Libertarian says, when they tried to recruit me, they said I was about 80 pounds overweight. Then they measured my waist and neck and said I was good. Oh, that kind of thing does happen.
Yeah.
Yes. That I think does happen. Absolutely. So look, I want to let everyone know that if you like what you're seeing, do me a favor. Please like it. I know I said it 1,000 times. If you haven't done it yet, please do it. Share this on Twitter. Share this on Facebook if you can. It does matter tremendously. Every little bit counts. And of course, please, if you can, support Collie if you can. Follow her on Twitter, KaliFontanilla. Follow her there, or check out her website at thinkexodus.org. Collie, before we wrap this up, anything else that I might have missed? Something you wanted to bring up?
I just think that everyone needs to do their part right now. I think that, if you've been called to start speaking up about this, if you're being called, here's the thing. Our children, they need you, even if you don't have kids in the educational system right now. They need you.
Okay.
So you can show up to these board meetings. You can say that you're concerned. Veterans need to show up and talk about how they're not training the next generation of kids that are going to be able to fight for this country. You're concerned with what's going on in the educational system. We all need to be doing our part right now, because I think we're in a 911 place. And I know that we're tired, and it's only going to get more tiring.
Yes.
So I also want to encourage everyone to take care of themselves. It's not easy. This has been a hard 2.5 years since I started speaking up, but there's also a lot of reward and blessings that happen when you do speak up. And if you're feeling called to do something, or at least support the ones that are on the front lines, because that's also very important. Support the ones that are on the front lines, or get on the front lines yourself, because this is everyone. It's a call to action to everyone, because we're headed towards some major catastrophes in this country if we don't get it together.
You heard the call to action, everybody. Guys, I want to say thank you so much for watching this evening. I appreciate it. Collie, thank you so much for giving us
of course
your time. I appreciate it. And I will be back on tomorrow, guys. Tomorrow at 7 p.m. I'll be on talking to somebody, actually, believe it or not, about homeschooling again, right? No, teachers unions again then. And I'm doing a fundraiser on Friday. So I will be back on tomorrow, and on Friday, I will see